So the UN Climate Conference got kicked off in Egypt this week, and the break in negotiation seems to have come from something like 6,000 miles away over in Bali. Monday's meeting between President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping, it appeared to have opened the ways for all the climate envoys to start working together again. You've got detailed climate negotiations in Egypt that have been slowed down. Now, usually negotiators, they'd already be deep in arguing over the details of the end of summit cover decision. And that would broadly set out this council and parties' economic, environmental, and political goals. The rough draft only appeared late on Monday. So far, the draft includes goals to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We all know that. You've got renewable energy commitments, doubling the funding to help developing countries adapt to climate change, and some sort of loss and damage support, paying for stuff caused from the bad impacts of climate change. But a reduction of fossil fuel use is missing. And that adds to the concerns about COP27's relative embrace of gas and oil producers. They've got a lot of pull. More moves on climate talks might come from Bali, where the leaders of the G20, that's the European Union, and 19 developing industrial economies, they're all meeting today and Wednesday. You've got UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He's called for them to break this dramatic geopolitical divides that are going on in order to keep the limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius alive. You've got more than 200 businesses and civil society leaders. They're all kind of calling out to do the same thing. So this G20 agenda, it's super packed. But gathering all of the leaders of the globe's biggest economies in one spot, except for Russian President Vladimir Putin, he's not going. It does create the opportunity for some sort of breakthrough. Back at COP27 in Egypt, other parties have launched a bunch of specific initiatives. Germany and the V20 group of climate vulnerable nations, they've unveiled this global shield on Monday. And that's a G7-backed initiative with about $219 million in funding. It's going to provide quick insurance and protection funding after big climate-related disasters. It adds to the loss and damage funding that's coming for droughts and heat waves and stuff from climate change, but you need a lot more. And then you've got like Brazil, Indonesia, and Congo. They launched a long-discussed partnership trying to get funding to protect their forests. Those three countries are home to about half the world's forests, tropical rainforests. That's an important store of carbon biodiversity. Brazil's new president, Luiz Inácio da Silva, he might also have a trick up his sleeve when he's talking at COP27 later this week. We'll see what he says. Then Indonesia, they've also agreed to a $20 billion just energy transition partnership. That's going to speed up Indonesia's shift from coal. It's going to reduce its peak emissions, and it's going to hit its peak by 2030. That is 7 years sooner than current projections. It's based on South Africa's $8.5 billion deal that was reached last year in Glasgow. That got off to a rocky start. So some of those concerns are meant to be fixed in Indonesia's plan. I hope they are able to do it. Companies are also starting to get in on climate action. You've got top executives from more than 100 companies, and they're calling for governments to act quickly and decisively to support climate action. You've got big fashion brands. They're using their purchasing power to back up the scaling up of more sustainable fibers for our clothes. The 65 companies in the Early Movers Coalition, they've also promised to buy something like $12 billion in low-carbon products and services to foster innovative new suppliers in hard-to-reach industries like cement and long-haul transport. Now, along some of the bad reports of the failure to do enough, there's a new bottom-up examination of key decarbonization trends that gives a little bit of hope. The report says on-the-ground trends in decarbonization, including the installation of renewables, electric vehicle purchases, and clean energy investment, it makes it likely that emissions are going to fall faster than promised in China, in the European Union, and in India. And that's according to the nonprofit Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. Now, the other top four emitters, including the U.S., shows a little bit of promising momentum as well. So we actually are starting to see a little bit of good news.